Chapter 1. Daddy, Daddy, we found a cave in the hills. Come and see, said 11-year-old Katie Hudson to her father Tom, who was working in the backyard. Their house was at the edge of the town named Redwater. Peaceful as it seemed to be, the town had its secrets. Deep in the darkness, they were waiting to be discovered. Tom Hudson looked up and squinted. The sun was shining straight into his eyes. It was already way past noon, but it still had the power to hurt the man's eyes. Katie and her brother, Alex, were running downhill to meet their father and bring him the exciting news. "What cave?" asked Tom, and furrowed his brows. "I've never heard of any cave being around here." "It is, Daddy," said Alex, who was only 9 years old and much more excited than his older sister. "It wasn't there yesterday, but it is now, I swear." "Really? And where did you spot that cave?" asked Tom, then scratched his head. His fingers almost disappeared in his thick black hair. His hair was not getting gray yet. His youthful looks and Viking-like cheeks made him an impressive presence. "Up there," continued Alex, and pointed toward the wooded hill behind him, just beyond those rocks. "All right. It must have been yesterday's earthquake, which caused it to open up. It was not a big deal, but a small to medium intensity. Earthquake shook this part of California. On the news, they saw that in Nevada, it was a little harsher. They were lucky, Tom thought, that even though their town is close to the neighboring state, here the damage was mild. He had to do some minor repairs on the house, and now Tom was working on the wooden fence, which separated their yard from the forested hillside behind. An old tree fell on it and broke several of the boards. The tree was dead, even when the Hudsons moved to Redwater 4 years ago, but Tom had been too lazy to deal with it. Now he had to work more, thus paying the price for his laziness. If the earthquake opened it up, Katie began a curious child's line of reasoning. That means that nobody had been inside before. "I guess that's right," replied Tom, already knowing what's coming next. "Are we going to explore it?" asked Alex, while jumping up and down with his enthusiasm over the roof. "What are you going to explore? Can I come too?" These questions belonged to Stevie Duncan, their neighbor's only child. "No, Stevie," replied Tom. "We will explore nothing. It might be dangerous." "Come on, Daddy, please," asked Katie in a pleading voice. "Please, Daddy, we want to see. We want to see," Alex continued, with his brown eyes open wide. Tom knew that he had to do something. He admitted to himself that he too was curious about that cave. The only thing he wanted to avoid was to put his children in danger. But then, he thought that if he doesn't take them there himself, they will go on their own. Children are curious by nature, he thought, while hammering a nail through 2 pieces of plank. They want to explore. The only obstacle in their way are the adults who force them to conform to all kinds of bullshit social norms and habits. "What's all this fuss about?" asked Greg Duncan, Stevie's father. He was taking out the trash when he heard the pleading children. "We will go on an adventure," said Katie. "Is that right, Daddy?" "I don't know, Katie. Just let me finish this. Then I'll think about it." "Think about what? What are you all up to?" asked Greg jokingly. "The kids said they found some cave which wasn't there yesterday." "Yes, we found it," Alex cut in. "It was the earthquake. Yesterday's earthquake might have shifted some rocks around. It's probably just a hole in the rock, nothing more." "It's a cave, Daddy. We've seen it," shouted Katie. All right. It's a cave then." "Then why don't you go and see it?" asked Greg. "I would go, but I have to go to my in-laws to give them a hand. The earthquake knocked a few loose shingles down their house, so I'll give them a quick hand." After hearing how casually is Greg talking about the trip, Tom decided that they should go. It shouldn't take more than about an hour. "Can I go with them, Dad?" Stevie asked his father. "Of course you can. Have some fun, but be back before nightfall. You'll be hungry after all that adventure." "All right, Dad," the child replied. "I'll be back for dinner." Greg left Tom with the three hyperactive and overly curious children. He decided to pause his work and get going. The more he hesitates, the more restless the kids will be, and they'll step on his nerves. Tom went back inside the house to tell Laura, his wife, that he's taking the kids on a hike, but they'll be back soon. She agreed, then kissed him goodbye. The children waved to her from the backyard. She waved back through the kitchen window. In Tom's garage, there were some flashlights. They were waterproof. Tom liked to buy quality products. He didn't want them to give up on him on a rainy night. He grabbed two, then checked his phone. They still had enough time to come back before sunset. A strange feeling took over him. He couldn't wrap his head around it. "What the hell?" he thought. It was like a void in his guts, a weird, empty feeling. Tom shook his head, then headed forward toward the back, where the children were waiting for him. "Maybe it's a sign," he thought, "that my midlife crisis had begun. Who knows? I'll have to buy a Harley, then be on my way." Reaching the kids, he spotted something on Alex's forearm. It was a red spot, a rash or a bite maybe. Tom took the little boy's arm in his hands to inspect the wound. It looked like a mosquito or spider bite. Considering that the wooded area behind their house is home to all kinds of bugs, it was most likely one of the above. Nevertheless, they started uphill towards the tree line. Chapter 2. The three children just couldn't hide their curiosity. They kept guessing what could be inside the cave. "A troll!" shouted Stevie, with his blonde hair shining in the sun. "No," shouted Katie. "Trolls are not real." "How do you know that?" asked Stevie, who was visibly irritated because of the girl's lack of belief. "I just know. Have you ever seen a troll?" "Maybe I did," replied Stevie, and stuck out his tongue. "You're a moron," said Katie, and stuck out her tongue too. "Watch your language, young lady," her father scolded the girl. They entered the forested area, and the cooling shades of the trees welcomed them. The uphill stroll was tiring, but their curiosity drove them on. "At least the kids will go to sleep earlier," thought Tom. "And maybe I and Laura will have a much-deserved sexy time." Tom loved his kids, and he also loved his wife. They were living the American dream: house, car, well-paying jobs, even though the town, which they lived in, was small. Its peacefulness made them move here, and none of them felt any regret. They had left the noise and smog of the big city behind. The only thing which remained was to live the happy life laying before them. Tom was looking around the small forest covering the hillside when he saw a strange-looking spider crawling on one of the trees. It resembled a black widow, only it was much bigger. He cringed, then continued after the kids, who were restlessly pushing upward. "Daddy, look! What's that?" asked Alex, while pointing to something which seemed to float in midair. It was a brown, rough-looking thing, which had an oval shape. It had the size of a small kiwi fruit, together with its color and surface texture. Tom searched for a stick, and he found one of about 3 feet long. "I don't have any idea what it is, but we'll see." "It's a giant piece of bird poop," said Stevie, then laughed. Tom went close to the object, but couldn't recognize it. The odd thing was hanging by a thread from a branch. Tom extended his hand, which was holding the stick, and touched the hanging ball. Nothing happened. He thought that maybe it was something which got caught in a spider web and was just dangling in the wind aimlessly. When he touched it again, this time a little harder, the thing opened up. 8 hairy legs extended from a brown, round body. It immediately looked much more menacing than before. "Yuck, a spider!" shouted Katie, obviously disgusted by the creature. "It's huge," said Alex, with awe and fear equally present in his voice. "Wow, that's a big one," said Tom. "I've never thought that there are such big spiders around here." "Let's kill it. It's ugly," said Stevie, but he was further away from it than the others. "No," replied Tom. "Spiders are our friends. They eat billions of bugs every day. Just imagine our lives with all those bugs around. Flies, mosquitoes, cockroaches." "I hate cockroaches," said Katie with a grimace on her face. "We'll leave it there," said Tom, but looked wearily at the creature. His skin erupted in goosebumps when he imagined the spider crawling on his skin. He was not necessarily afraid of spiders, he just didn't like them. A general repulsion made him avoid these creatures, even though he knew that they are useful. He thought of them as nature's crawling insecticides. Stevie erupted in a frantic screaming as they were walking through the trees. Tom got startled by this event, then jumped to help the little boy. "Get it down! Get it down!" Stevie shouted, and Tom saw that he was struggling with a spider similar to the one hanging from the tree. Tom grabbed the kid and tried to swipe the creature from his shoulder. He was successful, and the spider landed on the ground. It rushed to hide between the dry leaves and grass which covered the forest floor. "Ugly bastard," said Tom, then let out a sigh of relief. "Daddy, language," said Katie jokingly. "Oh, come on," said Tom, then looked up. His skin crawled again at what he saw. The brown hanging things were all over the place. He quickly signaled the kids to move. They hurried away until they saw no more of the strange spiders. "I've never seen these spiders, and I live here for 4 years, said Tom, more like as if he was talking to himself. "We've never seen them either," replied Katie, while scratching her curly-haired head. "No, and we are playing here all the time," said Alex. "Right, Stevie?" "Yes. There were no spiders like these here before." "All right, let's move on," said Tom, while picking up the pace. "Maybe we should go back," tried Stevie, but Alex cut in right away. "No way. I want to see the cave. You can go back if you want to." "Alex, don't be mean," said his father. "He's your friend." "Sorry, Daddy," Alex replied, with his head lowered in shame. "I didn't mean it." "All right. Let's just move on and check that cave out. It won't take long, and we'll be home for dinner with no problems." "Yay, let's go," shouted Alex, and ran ahead. The others followed in his footsteps. Tom couldn't stop thinking about the weird spiders. Where did they come from? It was understandable to see enormous spiders in Australia or the rainforests, but not here. Or maybe there are some species which are native to California, or they are some kind of wandering spiders. A story came to his mind. One of his late neighbors told him the story just after Tom. He and his family had moved here. He and his neighbor, Carlton Everett, were drinking beer on the porch of Carlton's house. The old man got silent for a short time. Tom saw that something was bugging his mind, and he was struggling to recall a past event. "I remember a hot summer, just like this one," said the old man, still staring into infinity. "It was so hot that the Red Spring got completely desiccated. The Red Spring originated from between the cliffs, close to where Tom lived. It got its name from the strange, reddish color which it gave to the rocks it passed over. The official statement said that there were various types of oxides, especially iron oxide, in the rocks where it came from. Nevertheless, the town got named after the spring, but its water was not suitable to drink. "What did you remember, Carlton?" asked Tom, then took a large gulp of beer. The cold and fizzy liquid caressed his dry throat. It was a blessing in hot summer afternoons like this. "There was a little boy," the old man continued. The bottle was gently shaking in his hand. "No more than 8, who disappeared close to where we live." "Disappeared?" asked Tom, with genuine surprise in his voice. Yes. He was playing alone somewhere at the foot of the cliffs, close to the spring. He didn't come home one night. His folks got concerned, you know. They began looking for him. Had they found him?" "Yes, they did," said Carlton Everett. Then a brief pause followed. Not alive, anyway. They were not even certain it was him. "How is that? How long did it take to find him?" "They found him the next afternoon, but some wild animal got to him first. Or it was what killed him. He was identified only by the clothes he was wearing. Many years later, when DNA identification became mainstream, they've got a match." "Was it so bad?" "All flesh was gone from his bones. I've never seen anything like it. No bones had been broken, though, just cleared completely of any soft tissue. It had happened fairly quickly, I suppose, because spiders had already woven their webs between his bones. It was a sad sight, just as if nature itself had made some kind of grotesque fun of the poor child. Horrible." "Well, it was," replied Tom, feeling truly sorry for the boy. "Have the authorities discovered what had killed him?" "I guess they didn't. It was a long time ago. The animal, or whatever had killed him, had also killed some other animals. We found several carcasses. Those damned spiders had used all of them as their home. That was all. Soon the weather got a little cooler. The spring water began flowing again. I don't know if these events have ever occurred again." Chapter 3. Soon they reached the enormous cliffs, which were on the top of the hill. Actually, it was a hill chain with more than 100 feet high cliffs on top of them. It was surrounding Redwater's west side. The cliffs were bare, ancient rock formations, standing against the blinding rays of the sun and the relentless winds. Whatever children of darkness were lurking under their cover, they were now free to roam the surface once more. "Come, Daddy, after us," urged Alex, and followed the cliff line. After a few minutes of walking, they spotted an opening in the rock formation. It was about 20 feet wide and 30 feet deep, completely devoid of vegetation, and with sharp rocks sticking out everywhere. It was a weird sight. At the end of the opening, a dark hole was visible in the rock. Tom sized it up, and it was about the size of a man. Pieces of rock and dirt were scattered around the opening. A large heap of them lay exactly at the hole. It really looked like the earthquake caused the loose rock to shake free and fall to the ground. "Hold on, Alex," ordered Tom as he saw his son run straight to the opening. "I've been here before, Daddy. It's safe." "You can't be sure of that?" "How do you know if all the rock above it isn't going to fall on your stubborn head?" "Well, I don't know that." "Exactly. That's why I'm going to check it out. Come here and stay put." Alex conformed and stood back. Katie and Stevie did the same. Tom walked to the cave entrance and checked it out carefully. Besides the heap of rocks, there was nothing to be concerned about. It seemed that there was nothing else close to falling off from above. "All right, it's safe," he said, and signaled the kids to come. They all ran to the entrance with blazing eyes. Even Tom was curious about it. He first thought that it will most likely be something insignificant, but he might have been wrong. This cave if it is truly a cave, might be a monumental discovery. Tom moved some rocks to the side in order to go inside. The kids helped him as much as they could. They moved the smaller rocks to the side. Alex was working frantically because he wanted to go inside as soon as possible. Tom noticed something strange. The rocks in the heap seemed to differ from the rocks which made up the surrounding cliffs. Tom was no geologist, but the difference was striking. It looked like the rock had been brought here from some other place. He shook the thought away, then continued with the work. After the major part of the obstacle had been removed, Tom took one of the flashlights out of his pocket and switched it on. He stepped inside the gaping mouth of darkness and felt the sulfurous smell of decay hitting his nose. It was not strong, more like a lingering warning drifting in the air, a warning that death is waiting. "What's that smell?" asked Katie with a grimace. "Something died in there," replied her father. "Probably some small animal." "But how did it get in if the cave was sealed?" Stevie asked, and thought about a lizard or rat laying desiccated somewhere on the ground. "I don't know," Tom replied. "There may be some other entrances to this place. Smaller tunnels in the rocks or underground could be used by rats, I guess. Or maybe snakes. I don't know." "Or spiders," said Katie. "Or maybe spiders," Tom replied, but then thought better of it. "However, I don't think that spiders can dig tunnels." "But they can use tunnels dug by other animals. Right, Daddy?" asked Katie again. "Maybe, I don't know. I'm not an expert in this field." "What's an expert?" Alex asked with questioning eyes. "Well, it's somebody who's very good at something. Like a scientist." "Yes, like a scientist." The cave walls were rugged. They had a reddish taint to them here and there. It was probably the iron oxide, which was also in the water, Tom thought. They kept walking with careful steps. Tom shone his light in all directions to explore the place. "Look, Daddy, a picture," Alex said, then pointed to the wall. It was a smoother part of the wall, and there was a painting on it. The same red material had been used, which was all around the cave walls. Tom and the kids were looking at it with wide eyes. "It's a drawing of cavemen," said Stevie. "Yes, and they are fighting something with spears." "Look," said Alex. "What's that? It looks like a giant spider." "There are no giant spiders. It's something else, but it sure looks like a spider." Tom became even more curious. If this ancient place had been discovered by them, then who knows what else they could find here. It will surely be not gold or other treasure, but it could be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the century. The cave painting was a good sign that the place was hiding much more interesting things. They ventured deeper into the darkness. The smell didn't get any worse, so that was a cause for relief. Tom and the kids were scanning the walls intently. With their hearts pounding of anticipation, but still taking careful steps, the group reached a larger chamber. Tom gave his other flashlight to Katie, but still instructed her to stay close. On the wall near the entrance to the chamber, they spotted another drawing. This was depicting a much more aggressive scene. Several gigantic spiders were on top of a figure which once might have been human. It looked as if the figure was being dismembered. Katie shone her light onto the chamber's ceiling. It was full of cobwebs. There was no sign of living spiders around them, only some of which were dead. The place looked exactly like an abandoned cellar, only it was bigger. Tom's skin crawled again, but the fact that nothing was moving up there gave him a little comfort. He was eager to find out what else did the cave offer. He was already fantasizing about calling the authorities to tell them about his discovery. Chapter 4. The group moved around carefully. Tom instructed the kids to stay close. Unknown dangers might wait for them at every step. While studying the cave ceiling, Tom noticed many small channels behind the spider web. They were of various diameters, from an inch or two to many inches wide. It was obvious that these channels were not natural. Someone had carved them into the rock. Something rattled on the floor. Katie let out a frightened gasp, then pointed her flashlight down. It was a piece of bone. "What is that, Daddy?" asked Alex. "It looks like the jawbone of some kind of animal," replied Tom, and picked it up. "What animal?" asked Stevie. "A dinosaur?" "No, Stevie, not a dinosaur. I think it belonged to a cow or a buffalo, maybe." "But how did it get in here?" asked Katie. "It was probably brought here a long time ago by the same people who had drawn those paintings," Tom replied, and pointed toward the wall where they saw the cave painting. "They hunted it down, right?" asked Alex. "Yes, I think so. I see carvings on the bone too, a sign that it was cleaned of meat by something crude, like a bone knife." "But why did they seal the cave?" asked Katie the obvious question. Tom thought for a moment. This question did not cross his mind. He was too busy exploring. Who knows who sealed the cave? Maybe it was somebody else in a later period. I can't tell. Maybe somebody was bothered by the cave because wild animals, wolves maybe, had used it as shelter. They didn't want them here, so they sealed it up. Tom turned the bone in his hand, then dropped it while jerking his hand back. He also uttered a quick cry of fright. At about half an inch from his fingers, an odd-looking spider was clinging to the bone. After Tom dropped the bone, the spider began crawling away. It was fist-sized, with a brownish-black color. The creature's legs were stubby and hairy. What was most striking about its appearance, though, were the stiff, horizontal appendages coming out of its head. They were full of teeth-like spikes on their inner sides. As the spider was running for cover, the appendages were moving in a scissor-like fashion. Tom was awakened from his amazement by Alex, who took a large rock and dropped it on the ugly crawler. The spider's innards shot out from under the rock and smeared over the cave floor. "Yuck, that was gross," said Katie, with a grimace of repulsion. "Sorry, but it was ugly," replied Alex. Tom didn't reply this time. He was glad that the spider got his guts spilled. It gave him a good scare. "Daddy, are we going to leave now?" asked Katie. "Why, honey? Didn't you want to explore the cave?" "I'm scared," she replied. "This place creeps me out." "All right, we'll leave soon. Just let me look around a bit, okay?" She nodded, but didn't like her father's answer. Searching the cave floor some more, Tom noticed that there are more animal bones scattered around. Reaching the opposite wall, he shone his light up. The remnant of a large rat was visible through the cobwebs. It looked fresh compared to the animal bones. A few weeks, maybe a month old. The rat might have come in through the many channels in the wall or ceiling, then got caught in the webs. Tom took a piece of long bone, which was lying by his feet, and probed the webs. He expected them to break away easily, but to his surprise, the webs were stronger than usual. So this is why the rat got caught. The web's unusual strength prevented it from escaping. But what spiders can make such strong webs? He jumped back when the rat moved. Tom looked with wide eyes, then saw a white spider crawling out of it. "What the hell?" he thought. "Are there white spiders anywhere in existence?" It had a small body, but long and slim legs. Small black stripes were visible on the creature's legs. From a distance, however, it looked completely white. "This must be a heaven for biologists," said Tom. while continuing to look around. "What's a biologist?" asked Stevie, but Tom couldn't answer. He heard a rumble and a scream. Tom quickly localized the direction the scream was coming from. It was Alex who had wandered away from the group. Tom ran deeper into the chamber and saw a gaping hole near one of the walls. Alex was moaning from down there. He was hurt. Tom could hear it in his voice. Panic overwhelmed him, but he tried to keep it together. Tom, Katie, and Stevie were standing at the edge of the hole. Fortunately, it wasn't too deep, so Tom could climb down and get the boy out. He gave the flashlight to Stevie, then prepared to descend. "Daddy, hurry! My leg hurts!" Alex cried from the bottom of the hole. "I'm coming. Just stay put, and I'll be there in a minute. Katie, Stevie, shine the lights into the hole." "Hurry, Daddy! Something is down here." Tom's face became as white as lime. Of course, in the dim light, this was not visible. His heart started pounding like a hammer. Now the only thing in his mind was to get his son out and go home as quickly as possible. Choosing to stay here was a bad idea, but it was already too late. "Come on, Daddy, I'm afraid," Alex pleaded, and his voice mirrored his emotional state in its entirety. When Tom lowered one of his legs into the hole, the earth gave way under him. He and the two kids fell, tumbling down the hole. Tom hit his head in the earth while he was trying to avoid falling onto Alex. He missed his son by inches. Katie and Stevie fell on him, so they were not seriously injured. Tom shook his head, then reached behind it with his hand. It was wet, which meant that he hit himself pretty well. The tunnel walls were slick with some kind of slime that had had enough time to dry somewhat. It was sticky, and the noxious smell it was emanating was burning their nostrils. "Daddy, are you all right?" asked Katie with panic in her sweet voice. "Yes, I guess I'm all right," he said, to avoid inducing more panic in the children. He tried to get up, but the world was whirling around him. Katie found one of the flashlights, and she was searching for the other one. She finally found that one too, but it was broken. It fell onto a sharp rock and refused to work anymore. Alex tried to stand too, but he found it difficult to do. He was cupping his left knee with his palms. At every move, he sniggered. Something was either broken or torn. "Are you hurt, Alex?" his father asked. "I think so," the boy replied in a voice of agony. "I think I broke my knee." "All right. We'll get out of here soon. Just let me look around, okay?" Alex nodded, but the grimace of pain remained painted on his face. "Hurry, Daddy," pleaded Katie, and her voice was shaking. "I'm afraid." "I will find a way," Tom replied, having no idea what to do. "I'll get us out." "Don't worry." "What's this smell?" asked Katie. "I don't know, honey. Who knows when was the last time this place had seen some fresh air?" "It's gross," said Stevie. "I want to get out of here." Tom pointed the flashlight around and inspected his surroundings. They fell into a tunnel that was clear to him. It was fairly large. A man could easily walk through it by staying upright. To his left, the tunnel was not as wide as to his right. He could see a large lump on the ceiling on the left side at about 12 feet from them. To the right, the tunnel seemed like going upwards a little. It might go to the surface, he thought. "Daddy, let's go, please. I heard something moving down here," Alex pleaded. "It was probably a rat, don't worry," replied Tom, visibly frustrated. Tom wanted to go to the right to check out where there was leading to. Suddenly, the rustling Alex had been talking about began again. He stopped and turned with the light in hand. Nothing. The rustling stopped. The children were looking around in fear. They were staying close to Tom. "Daddy, I can't really walk. My leg hurts," said Alex, hoping that Tom will carry him. "Oh, sorry," Tom replied, then reached for his son with both hands. I will slowly lift you up. Hope it won't hurt much. He lifted his son up, then followed the tunnel. After a few feet, the rustling came again from behind them. Tom turned and looked, but saw nothing more out of the ordinary than it already was. They continued, but after a few more steps, they saw that the tunnel took a sharp turn and went almost straight up. There was no way they could continue, especially with the injured Alex. What are we gonna do? Asked Stevie with shaking legs. Wait, I have an idea, said Tom, and turned back. Katie and Stevie followed. He went back to the place where the ground had caved in. The lump which had been on the tunnel's ceiling seemed to be closer than before. Tom shook his head. He thought about the fall and how he had hit his head. He was not seeing things right. At least this was what he was thinking. Katie, Stevie, Tom began, I will try to lift you up to the surface. I will begin with Stevie because he is smaller. Then I'll try to lift you, Katie. Stevie can help from up there in case you are too heavy. The children nodded. Having a plan gave them some sense of security, or maybe hope. Anyway, hearing a plausible plan to save themselves helped a great deal to lift their spirits. Alex, I will put you down here, said Tom, and placed the boy on the ground with his back to the tunnel wall at a few feet distance from the opening above, and then try to get Stevie and Katie out. All right? Alex just nodded while holding his knee. It was pulsating with pain, which began to manifest itself as the level of endorphins was declining. Stevie was a skinny kid. Tom lifted him up easily. The faint light which was creeping in through the cave's main entrance was enough for Stevie to see his way around. The agile little boy got out with no problems. Next came Katie. She was heavier, however. Lucky for her, Tom was still in good shape. Tom didn't think that all these years of going to the gym will pay off. A thud, a scream, then quick rustling hit their ears. Then more screaming. Pull, Stevie, pull! Screamed Tom. And when he felt that Katie's legs are going up on their own, he quickly turned with the light in hand. He saw a shape crawling in the distance, in the left part of the tunnel. Alex's screams were coming from farther and farther away. These screams, however, were the worst Tom had ever heard until now. The lump which used to be on the ceiling was not there anymore. Tom couldn't wrap his mind around this, nor he had the time for it. Go get help! He shouted at Katie and Stevie, then began running in the direction where the screams were coming from. Chapter 5. After the children ran for help, Tom began a frantic and desperate search for his son. The tunnel was leading down into the dark heart of the earth. Also, as Tom was pressing forward more and more, the number of spiders, which were clinging to the walls, seemed to increase. Tom hated this, but he was interested only in getting Alex back. Spiders were falling on him from above his head. He was constantly running into webs, which seemed like partially broken, just as if something big had passed through here recently. He almost fell a few times because of the spiders, which got squished under his feet. Their slippery innards were making his job harder, but Tom was concentrating with all his might not to fall. The smell was also getting worse and worse. It was like the stench of rot and decay, but combined with sulfur and the coppery smell of dried blood. Tom was running, but the quality of the air was deplorable. For a split second, a stray thought rushed through his chaos-filled mind. How come that these spiders flourished in this awful environment? He had heard of the existence of cave spiders, but not in this number, size, and variety. He had to leave the scientific questions behind because his lungs were burning. The lack of oxygen and various toxins made the tunnel whirl around him. He saw and felt the flashlight shake in his hand. After brushing down the spiders, which were crawling on him, he continued following the tunnel. Some of them had bitten him, but he didn't really care. There was nothing he could have done anyway. Had this been some kind of competition on some stupid commercial television channel, he wouldn't have come down here for $1 billion. Because his son was in danger, he had no choice. In the blink of an eye, his feet found no purchase anymore. He slipped and fell on his ass. From there, the road was leading only down. Squishing spiders and hurting almost every square inch of his body, Tom was sliding down with the speed of a roller coaster. He shouted, and his shouts were echoing through the endless tunnels. But there was nobody to heed them, only the darkness and the spiders. After several seconds of sliding, he hit the bottom of the tunnel. The fall was not that bad, but it added to the pain Tom was feeling through his body. He pointed his flashlight around and was astonished by the size of the chamber. By his quick estimation, it was almost as big as a commercial swimming pool. There were lots of columns made of earth, which seemed to support the ceiling. Tom stood up and began walking around the place, trying to pick up movement or sound. Alex's screams, maybe. To his surprise, he didn't see many spiders around. There were some which had fallen down with him, and after he had hit the bottom. But that was all. Something was not right. He could feel it. Nothing had been right for a long time, of course, but his guts told him that there is something even worse here. He saw lumps of earth, which had roughly the shape of an egg, but much larger. These formations were reaching waist height, and they were full of holes the size of a drain in a kitchen sink. His natural tryptophobia had been triggered, and his skin began erupting in goosebumps. Tom hated this sensation, which got stronger when he saw the first thin black spider leg coming out of one of the holes. It was probing the air, feeling for vibrations. Tom turned and walked away to find some passage out of this place. There was no sign of Alex or whatever had taken him. There was no other choice for him, only to press forward. His guts spoke to him again. Tom couldn't get the probing spider legs out of his mind, so he stopped and turned to see what's behind him. From the many egg-shaped rock formations, a legion of small, black spiders were swarming out. It was as if all the ground behind him had come alive. Run, his instincts told him, so he ran like crazy. These spiders seemed much more aggressive than any of them so far. As Tom was running between the columns and the strange nests, he saw more and more spiders spurt out around him. The noise which the spiders were making with their small, pointy legs was audible in the silent cave. Of course, a few of them would have made no sound at all, but considering that there must have been at least many thousands of them, Tom could hear their collective movements. Hope was fading quickly, but Tom didn't give up. The adrenaline and the desire to hold his son again in his arms drove him forward toward the other side of the chamber. Another tunnel lay in front of him. This one was a little wider than the previous one. Here, the spider webs became thicker, and there were more. Tom ran straight into them. Some of them broke off easily, but others were harder to tear. They were slowing Tom down a great deal. He turned for a split second and shone the flashlight behind him. To his great surprise, nothing was following him. Also, the rustling became more and more distant. They had been scared to enter this place. This was his first thought. The presence of the webs was unnerving great, together with the fleeing of the small spiders. Tom looked around carefully. Bones were littering the cave floor. Blood froze in his veins when he saw several human skulls on the ground. This was when he realized that there was a really high chance that neither he nor his son was going to make it out alive. One of the skulls rattled. Tom pointed his flashlight toward it and felt his legs turn to rubber. Thick, hairy legs were spurting from under the skulls. The light revealed many small eyes gleaming through the eye sockets of the skull. It was the largest spider he had seen so far, bigger even than the tarantulas he saw on TV when he was watching the Discovery Channel. Tom noticed now that there were many more skulls laying on the ground. They all began to move. He had no choice but to run. Even though he was tired and thirsty, Tom bolted towards the deepest parts of the cave. With the army of small spiders covering his only retreat, he had no choice. Running like hell and clenching the flashlight with desperation, he saw movement all around him. The air was barely breathable, and the temperature was rising. Sweat, blood, dirt, and spider juice was covering him from head to toe. The tunnel ended again, and he fell for about 6 feet. As Tom couldn't see if there was a bottom or not, he almost had a heart attack when he saw the gaping darkness under him. But it wasn't deep, fortunately for him. It wasn't too hard either, but squishy and soft. It was also reeking like nothing else he had smelled in his life. Tom stood quickly up and surveyed his surroundings. He saw eggs everywhere. From small to large, they came in all shapes and sizes. Spider webs were covering everything. He got covered in them. Small spiders were running in panic through the webs which had stuck to him. He felt the tickling of their small legs on his skin. With panicked moves, he struggled to brush them off. Some of them fell, but some remained tangled in the webs. Tom took a few steps forward and heard what sounded to him as the gentle flow of water. He continued with high hopes on the ground, which was infested with spider eggs. Then, after a minute or two, he saw what it was. A small and thin stream with reddish coloration to it. Even the ground and the rocks in and around the stream were red. He quickly found out where the redness came from. It was oozing out of the mucus substance which was covering the ground and in which the eggs were embedded. It was some kind of fertile substance for this hatchery of monsters. Tom suddenly realized where this stream is going. It goes straight out through the rocks and continues on its way through the fields around the town. This where the town got its name. A faint scream was resonating through the underground chamber. Or was it just Tom's tired mind playing tricks on him? He wasn't sure. "Alex!" he shouted, but then thought that it might have been a mistake. A sharp thud sounded behind him. Tom pivoted, but he wished he didn't. An enormous beast of a spider stood before him. Its body was at least at waist height. Many small eyes were staring menacingly at Tom. The hideous creature had over 8 eyes, as spiders usually have. There were at least 16 on its head. Tom unconsciously wondered for a moment, what purpose do those eyes serve, since it is pitch black inside the cave? In a conscious manner, however, he drew back, but when he felt that the ground is sloping downward, he stopped. Tom took a quick glance behind him and saw a large hole in the ground. It was several feet wide, but he couldn't estimate its depth because it was full of spiders. Like an undulating mass of dark water, the spiders were crawling upon each other. They seemed to be the size of his palm, maybe smaller, but the prospect of falling in there made him rethink his options fast. The gigantic spider screeched, so Tom pointed the flashlight toward it again. It raised its 2 front legs up, its body raised partially in the air. It was a terrible sight. Showing obvious superiority before attacking its prey, the spider screeched again. Tom didn't wait to see what is coming next. He darted in the direction the red stream was flowing. Also, the scream which he heard earlier seemed to come from this direction too. So, it was his only chance to both try to escape and also find his son. The giant spider, however, darted after him. Chapter 6. Tom was running. He felt his leg muscles ache, but he could not stop. He heard the sounds of the giant spider's many legs hitting the ground. It was fast. He knew it. He felt it. The sharp steps were way too frequent, and he heard them coming closer and closer. The slimy spider eggs were bursting under his feet as he stepped over them. Several times, he was close to slipping, but the adrenaline in his veins was making him more careful and precise in his steps. It was like his brain was in overdrive, making considerably more calculations than on a normal day with no gigantic spiders chasing him. In the distance, he saw a dark opening in the cave wall. It was most likely the way which had been carved into the rock by the corrosive water of the mountain stream. The flashlight's beam was dancing in front of him as he was running. Chaotic images of darkness, light, shadows, spiders, and who knows what else were reaching his eyes. He could have faltered at any step. He was not really trying to see where was stepping. There was no time for it. Tom had to move. At any step, there was the risk of one of the enormous beast's friends to come out of the darkness and impale him or force him to the ground and bite his throat. The dark hole in the cave wall was getting closer. Also did the spider. Tom didn't give up. He had a few more feet. Now, the flashlight illuminated the hole somewhat, and he saw that it might be wide enough for him to crawl in, but not wide enough for the spider to go after him. Tom ducked and went down on all fours in front of the opening just in time. Something had hit the rock above his head as he was halfway inside. Pieces of stone and earth fell in front of the entrance, thus partially blocking the way. The giant spider stuck its ugly face inside, but it was too small. Tom kicked at it a few times, and the spider recoiled in anger. "That's it," he shouted. "Fuck off, you ugly beast." The spider tried one more time, but as more rock was falling on its head, it gave up. Tom searched his surroundings. The tunnel was about 3 feet wide and 3 feet high. He couldn't see any spiders here, which was good news. The slimy and noxious red stream, however, was flowing right beneath him. It soaked his clothes, its smell filled his nose, and he was close to throwing up. It was now that he realized that he was thirsty, but drinking from this poisonous stream was no option. He had to resist the thirst and go forward. There was no turning back. He had to find Alex, or die trying. Tom stopped to think for a few minutes. His head was throbbing, his muscles and lungs aching, but he had to calm himself at least a little in order to think this through. The thing which took his son was smaller than the one which had attacked him. He now realized that it must have been the strange lump on the ceiling of the tunnel which seemed to change its position. It must have been some other type of spider. A lurker, maybe, because it could blend in into the surroundings. It attacked only when the child was vulnerable. It didn't take any chances. If the screams came from her, then I have to go through here, he thought. Tom took a deep breath, almost threw up again, then began crawling through the tunnel. He was thinking of the survivor programs, which you can see on Discovery Channel or other science channels. They always tell you to follow streams or rivers, because they will most likely lead you to some kind of civilization. He uttered a faint laugh, because this stream doesn't lead to any civilization. it leads into darkness and certain death. Still, he had no other choice. Tom crawled and crawled for endless minutes, but the tunnel was just dragging on. After some time, it got a little wider and higher. His hopes went up, so he sped up. The tunnel never became so high for him to stand upright, but he could walk in a hunched manner. The slimy tunnel floor was still dangerous, but he kind of learned how to manage it. The smell became worse by the minute. He knew that the implications of this can be only bad. Finally, he could stand upright again, but then he saw that he reached the end of the tunnel. A huge open space stood before him. It was both deep and wide. He looked around with the flashlight, but couldn't see much. He saw that the foul water was flowing down into a pool or something similar. He deduced this by the sound it was making. It sounded like a waterfall, only a little thicker. Clean water falling into a pond makes a different sound than contaminated, slimy water. Tom realized this instinctively. In front of him, many feet away, he saw a structure which looked like a thick column, but he couldn't make it out much. He leaned over the edge to look down. He could see the faint contours of the pond below him. By his estimation, it was about 10 feet below him. Shit, I have to jump, he thought, and began doubting his quest. Tom was not afraid of heights, but the prospect of landing in knee-deep water from 30 feet was not good at all. There was no way for him to know how deep the water below was. At quick logical analysis, it must be deep enough to jump in. Supporting this theory is the fact that this cave, together with the stream, must be ancient. So, in many thousands of years, the water flowing from here could have carved a basin deep enough for a human to jump in. The water is also most likely corrosive, so it had a stronger chance to eat the rock and earth, thus eroding it away in a quicker fashion. The prospect of jumping, however, still proved to be impossible. It doesn't matter how logical a person you are, fears and instincts are much deeper and older than analytic thought. The neocortex is much younger than the reptilian brain, after all. Tom then remembered something from his childhood. Near the town where he had grown up, there was a lake which he had visited with friends. They used to figure out the depth of the water by throwing rocks into it. A rock hitting shallow water sounds different from a rock hitting deeper water. This revelation was welcome to Tom, so he turned to find a rock somewhere near him. His surprise was great, however, because behind him, on the tunnel ceiling, he saw the same kind of spider which had taken his son. He froze in fear, knowing that behind him is a deep chasm, stopped him from going back. The spider was indeed blending into the surroundings, like a chameleon. What betrayed it was the reflection of the flashlight beam in its dark eyes. It dropped to the ground and fell on its hairy feet like a cat. Tom gasped. His heart and mind were racing, but there was nothing he could do. The spider inched closer and raised its front legs, just like the big one earlier. It was ready to attack, so Tom drew back instinctively. He couldn't control it. It was the reptilian brain taking over again, but now choosing the better out of two evils. Tom slipped, and his body began falling backwards. He extended his hands, but he grasped only air. There was nothing to hold on to. Chapter 7. His heart almost stopped from fear as he fell. Tom rolled in the air and then hit the water below. He was waiting to feel his head or spine crack after hitting the rocky bottom, but none of that happened. The water was deep enough, so he survived the fall. His ears, mouth, and nose filled with the disgusting liquid, but he had no time to react. He had to get out of here. Tom got to the surface and swam in one random direction. In a few seconds, he reached the edge of the pond. The flashlight was still in his hand. The fright he felt when falling made him clutch it with all his strength. He was lucky for buying waterproof flashlights. He would have been dead now without a light source. After he crawled out of the pool of foul water, he threw up. There was not much coming up from his stomach, but it had to come out. Now, combining with the bitter taste of bile, it was much worse. He would have sold his car for a drop of water now. The retching subsided, and he stood upright to inspect the place. It was a vast hall again. The air was barely breathable. He looked up at the waterfall. It was about 30 feet high. The spider was long gone. At least he couldn't see it. It might have retreated, or maybe it was searching for a way to him again. It was a sneaky bastard. Maybe it was the same one who had taken Alex. Walking around the pond, he saw that the flow of water continued towards the endless darkness. All right, he thought, more following to do. The place was deserted, and he knew that it was strange. Until now, almost every part of the cave was filled with spiders, but not this. What is keeping them from filling this place, just like the other places? As he was following the stream of water, which was a little wider than before, he shone his light on the column-like object to his left. It was a strange formation. Sharp rock formations were protruding in all directions from it, seemingly defying gravity. He began walking in its direction. Maybe it was some special place for these damned spiders. The ground was barren, no spiders, no eggs, only mud and rocks. Tom walked carefully, not to make any unnecessary sounds. He did not want to wake up anything which might lurk here. There is no way, he thought, that this place is empty. Something has to be here. He stopped and listened. He felt his own heartbeat. But there was something else as well. A faint murmur was permeating the air. It was constant, with a regular cadence to it, like the sound made by a slumbering beast in darkness of a forest. Tom went closer to the strange formation and saw that it was actually thicker at the bottom. Curved, sharp protrusions of several feet were all over it. What the hell is this? He asked himself. Some kind of shrine to the almighty spider god? Near the bottom of the formation, he saw some bag-like things hanging from the protrusions. Going closer, he hit something on the floor. Tom looked down and saw bones again. He couldn't determine if they were human bones or not. As he was approaching the bottom of the formation, he saw the heap of bones which was surrounding it. Damn, he thought. This is bad. I have to get out of here. Then he noticed that the murmur he had heard before got a little louder. It was as if the cave itself was a living and breathing thing. Tom heard a whimper. It was coming from somewhere nearby. First, he couldn't recognize the sound, so his muscles tightened at the strange sound. The whimper came again. He looked around with the flashlight to determine where it came from. The strange bags, he thought, then looked at them more closely. It seemed to him that they are made of spider silk, or maybe something was wrapped up with spider silk. They had many strange shapes, but one of them was the suspicious. It resembled the shape of a child. Oh no, he thought, as the realization dawned on him. Oh God, no. He rushed to the thing, which was hanging at about 4 or 5 feet above ground on a thread of spiderweb. Tom illuminated the object and saw that indeed it is a child beneath the many layers of sticky web. He put down the flashlight and reached up with a racing heart towards the thing which had all the chances in the world of being his son, Alex. He grabbed it with both hands and pulled gently. The web extended, but then it snapped. Tom took up the flashlight again, then cleared away the webs from the child's face. Tom recognized his son. His face was pale, and his lips were turning blue. "Alex," he whispered, "can you hear me?" No answer came for a few seconds, but then the child whimpered again. His eyes opened a bit, but couldn't open fully. Now Tom understood that Alex must have been injected by some paralyzing agent by the spider which took him. He knew that time is of the essence now. His son's life was, ironically, hanging by a thread now. He began thinking. His brain was in overdrive now. Tom felt an overwhelming exhilaration because of finding his son. But the fact that Alex was barely alive and he was deep in this spider-filled cave made him feel hopeless. The only thing which came to his mind was that he had to follow the flowing water. Going back was impossible. Tom turned to go, but then the murmur turned louder. He stopped, and he felt cold chills in his bones. There was something here, something much worse than anything he had seen so far. Snapping and clicking sounds filled the darkness of the cave. They were coming from behind him, from the direction of the odd formation. He looked back and saw in horror that the thing was moving. The appendages were probing at the air. They were searching. Tom pointed his light toward the top of the formation and saw that there, too, limbs were moving like long spider legs. He looked at its bottom again and almost screamed in horror. An eye had opened on the thing. It was as if it just woke up from a long slumber. Several other eyes opened up on the body of the nameless horror, which was at least 100 feet tall. The appendages began moving more and more. The thing growled. It echoed through the chamber several times. It was like a call which must have been heard by all the cave's denizens. Tom didn't wait around anymore. He took off, following the stream. Holding his dying son to his chest, he heard the millions of spider legs following him. First, the sounds were distant, but after several more growls from the ancient beast, they picked up the pace and were closing in on Tom. He was running as fast as his legs could carry him. Every few seconds, he made sure that he is following the stream. Then, after a few minutes of running, he saw that the water is flowing again into an opening inside the cave wall. "Oh no," he thought. "What is waiting for me on the other side again? Another one of these things." It didn't matter, however. With his last remaining energy, he crawled inside the opening and pressed forward with a speed he couldn't have imagined he could ever reach. The adrenaline was doing its job again. "At least the big ones can't reach me here," he thought. Crawling forward, with the water deep enough to reach his jaw, he had to be careful not to drown his son. The tunnel sloped downward again, but it was not too steep. He was still hearing the distant sounds made by his pursuers, but then he almost screamed from exultation. A small glimpse of light appeared at the end of the tunnel. Tom switched off the flashlight for a split second to see if it is not just a hallucination brought on by the fatigue. It was not, so he pressed forward with renewed strength. He reached the end, and he could see clearly that the opening in the rock is leading to the outside. The hole, however, was too narrow for him to crawl through. He did another desperate brainstorm, but he could reach only one conclusion. If he pushes his son through, and he remains inside, he will surely die, but also will Alex, because nobody will know that he is there. Given that the rock was eaten away for many generations by the corrosive stream, it must be looser than in other places. He had to break through. There was enough space for him to turn with feet forward. He began kicking at the rock. which was just above the narrow hole where the stream was flowing outside. After the first kick, he knew that the rock was loose enough for him to break it. He kicked again and again. The sounds from the darkness came closer. He could hear them. He could also hear the desperate cries of the horrible monster of the cave. This gave him strength to kick harder, and with the next try, he broke through. Pieces of rock were projected outward. He heard the splashes made by the rocks in the water. Earth began falling on him too. It was loose above him too. It filled his eyes and mouth, but he didn't care. With a last effort, Tom crawled outside and heard the tunnel cave in after him. He stood up and cleared his eyes and dry mouth as much as possible. The hole was closed, but one spider still made it through. He stepped on it, crushing the creature under his boot. Then he realized that his son still needed help. His eyelids were still moving, but Tom knew that he is on the brink, so he ran towards the town in order to find help. Tom Hudson saved his son, but the story he told was not believed by anybody. A subsequent aftershock sealed the cave entrance before anybody could take a serious look inside. The spiders, which came out of the cave, scattered in the nearby wooded area. The unimaginable horror which Tom had witnessed remained sealed deep within the cave. For now, the end.